Welcome to the Prime Venture Partners podcast. I am delighted to have with me today Tanmay Bhat. It's actually a bit of a fanboy moment for him. I've actually seen him perform many times, way in the past.
Really?
When he was. I actually have, yes, in Bombay, no less. And
Oh, okay. Interesting.
yeah, and actually maybe from when you're still a quote unquote kid, but even when you were younger, and so I've become a big fan, and I've just seen your journey from those days to becoming a creator, to being in the creator economy, to now participating and co-running a DAO, and so many other interesting things. So I'm really glad he's taking the time to hang out with us. So welcome to the show, Tanmay.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you. Since I am now a Bangalore person, I was like, I need to, I need to do these podcasts, and I need to I need to get deeper in the Bangalore ecosystem. So here I am. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I didn't know you watched me perform. Okay, cool. I don't know if that's
I
embarrassing or
have
that's good.
many moons ago, but yeah, it was great. So you're obviously a very creative person, and that thread seems to run through your entire professional life, as it may. You also mentioned that you are building multiple careers in public, but I want to go back to the beginning. You always said in multiple podcasts and so forth, you're always obsessed with advertising. So talk to us about some of the early inspiration to start creating things, and when did you figure out that boss talent hai kuch karna chahiye isme, right? Or was it just serendipity that sort of led the way?
I think, to be very honest, right? So I was a fat kid. तो बचपन में बस अटेंशन चाहिए था, ठीक है. तो जब मैं स्कूल में होता रहा तभी I think it would be okay to say I was a fairly bright student. I was always in top 3 in class. तभी देखो, टीचर के साथ जब भी टीचर कोई सवाल पूछती थी, I was the kid who would make a joke and the whole class would snigger, and that feeling was really good. उसमें मजा आता रहा कि अरे अच्छा, सबको अच्छा लगता है ये. टीचर बोलने लगी कि तन्मय तन्मय तुम तो मतलब क्लास में तुम जब रहते हो ना, कुछ तो मजा ही आता है. That used to feel really nice. And I think as when you're a fat kid, you want to latch on to any sort of validation that you would get, and that I think was the beginning of the drug addiction, which is called need for validation. And then very very early on, so I was growing up in those years, right? If you meet I meet a lot of senior advertising folks now, right? And it's one thing that's common at that point. There weren't too many options for a creative career, right? Distribution was a lot more centralized at that point. If you wanted the idea that you want to be a filmmaker was incredibly daunting, because you would kill your dream the moment you thought of it. Like, picture kaise banayega hum to, right? Thinking of wanting to be an artist was also difficult because modes of distribution were so limited that being a TV host, being an actor, being a renowned singer seemed incredibly unachievable. But the thing that seemed achievable was being a copywriter. Ad तो लिख सकता हूं मैं, क्योंकि मेरे दोस्तों ने कहा है कि मैं बकचोदी कर सकता हूं, right? ये तो मैं कर सकता हूं. That felt incredibly achievable. That felt within reach. And all these college festivals and that sort of stuff would always have a mad ads segment where the most creative people, or quote unquote creative, जो सबसे मस्ती खोर होते थे, वो करते थे. So that's when I decided that very early on in school, I knew that I wasn't cut out to be a doctor or an engineer, because I didn't derive joy in that. Albeit my dad wanted me to be a marine engineer. I did science from Mitibai, and that's when I realized that, okay, I think copywriting is it. I used to be obsessed. I used to spend hours and hours on agencyfaqs.com. I knew which agency in Bombay had what client. I would read everything by Prasoon Joshi, Piyush Pandey. I have photos of me in college having pictures with them. But it was mostly that I wanted to do something creative for a living. Then I discovered the salaries that copywriters get paid, and I said maybe some other form of creativity would be fun. And one day I was at St. Xavier's at Malhar, the festival. I was participating in a personality contest type of a thing, Mr. Malhar, and Ronnie Screwvala and Zarina Mehta were the judges, and they were launching Bindas at that point. And they put me in touch with Roshan Abbas's production company that was making a show about stand-up comedy. And they said, "Ye banda funny lag raha hai, why don't you go work there?" And that was my introduction to some sort of a formal writing contract. I used to write columns here and there, funny columns here and there. I used to write a blog and that just expressing myself. But that was my first foray into proper writing. Then I wrote for television. I've written for radio. I've written multiple movies. Then eventually stand-up happened much later by the time I was, 23, 24. But I did a bit of everything. Yeah, that's how it began.
So let me go back to the early days, right? Not just in college, but maybe even in school. Like, how do you know, everybody's cracking jokes, right? Like, I mean, not everybody, but like, there's enough percentage of people who are cracking jokes that you are exceptional, right? And that you should kind of cultivate it and pursue it. And I'm like also a big fan of Jerry Seinfeld, and just wrote this book a couple of years ago about every single joke that was in Seinfeld, that he would try in bars, that he would go in stand-up shows, was, A/B tested. Sorry, I'm a nerd, right?
No, but
left brain side.
I completely relate to that. I would have, it was almost like it's like I'm constantly honing a script since I was a kid. I know the feeling that he's talking about. I have found myself saying the same jokes around the same friends in multiple situations, and they point out saying, "Ye tune udhar bola tha already ek baar, ye maine suna hai," right? And I'm like, I don't know what it is, but every situation my brain automatically went into what is the thing that can get a laugh. So much so that eventually I got conscious of it, and then you start using these. I think humor is the superpower, right? Humor can be infused in any situation, and it just makes the situation so much better. And then eventually I started learning the tricks of the trade. For example, when I used to pitch, I used to write with Rohan and Ashish and Khamba and all these guys. We began by writing for these award shows. And when we used to write these award shows, the pitching process was always a little fascinating, because it's like you're actually selling, right? The skill is to sell your script, right? So what we used to do is we used to enter the room, and me and Rohan would just look at each other and we would switch on. एक switch on होता है कि इस रूम में माहौल बनाना है अभी, ठीक है? तो पहले 10 मिनट हम बस करंट अफेयर्स बात करेंगे, न्यूज में क्या चल रहा है. That time we used to obsessively tweet, right? Tweeting was our daily workout. कि ये कुछ हो गया, joke मारा, ये कुछ हो गया, joke मारा. And we'd spend the first 10 minutes just building trust in the room that we are the funny guys. Because it became a lot easier to sell once that trust was established. Then some other small things were, when you're pitching something, you always want to reject some of your own jokes to show that you have skin in the game, you care about this. ये joke थोड़ा ज़्यादा हो रहा है, मुझे पता है कि ये reject कर लेते. So while writing itself, we would think of jokes that were either too blasphemous for the occasion, and we would put it in saying, this is the rejected joke that we will put in so that the other person feels like they got their word in. So humor was a superpower, and it's merely the medium of any kind of expression. So तभी it's never कि अब craft hone करते. It was कि हर जगह वही थी. That was the only way of doing it. Be it an essay that I've written in school, that very kindly I had a really lovely professor called Mrs. Putran, who was one of the first to validate this. Really teachers play a very significant role when you're young. No, I remember I used to, there was Hindi, Marathi, English, and I used to always feel extremely comfortable in English because I felt like I could express myself most. Because of her, there was one particular essay, school में तभी essay लिखना होता था जहाँ पे सब रट के आते रहे ना ऐसे. SSC medium में ऐसे भी रटा होता था. Your way of expressing yourself was also memorized. तो एक ऐसे था जहाँ पे मैंने रटा नहीं था, तो मैंने जो मन में आया लिख दिया. She gave me 9 on 10, the highest in class on that essay. And she said, "Do you know why I've given you this?" I said, "Why?" She's like, "Because you're original, and very few people are that." तो तब से मेरे मन में वो आ गया कि originality तो चाहिए यार, And when you're a kid, when someone validates you for that, it becomes significant.
Great.
Yeah.
I wanted to interject. You talked a little bit about earlier about the journaling process, which you recently tried. But even as you're writing these shows, whether it's award shows or ad copies or whatever, were you also iterating on paper, like just how you would normally do a journaling for yourself or whatever? Or was it more like you tried in the real world, go, mahal bana diya kisi jagah mein, and then you say, "Arey, wo to that clicked, so now let me just write this down." Or was that what was the creative process like then and now?
So now I've started. I mean, it's still not a perfect habit yet, but I'm starting to journal because there are two different subjects. I want to get to one of them. The first one is I'm now starting to journal because I want to develop a stand-up special. And comedy now is, unlike 10 years ago, it's no longer an occasion, right? There's memes. Everyone's a comedian on Twitter. Which is why if you see, making jokes about sliced bread, which is there used to be observational comic, where they would take a glass of water and they would attack it from all sides and see what's funny about this, what is interesting about this. They would use, verbal craft to find whatever is funny about it. That's how people used to build material. At that time, this was rare. But now, because of memes, there is an observation and a joke about everything that exists. So now I was noticing a trend in, stand-up comedy specials, which is, okay, if just pure observations has been democratized and decentralized to this degree, what is interesting? What's interesting is high opinion. I think opinions can still be very, very original, and topical, and hence feels very consumable. Perspective and high storytelling, because that's the most unique and original thing about each person, and everybody's craft there is different. Observation about sliced bread can be replicated, but your personal story and journey cannot be. So for that very purpose, I was like, okay, right now I still find myself getting on stage to just derive laughs, whereas I'm trying to change that. And also when it comes to comedy, something that I've learned the hard way, likability is everything, right? Russell Peters is a phenomenal example of that, right? Russell was one of the first most loved people that people saw online. He was the immigrants, representative. Everybody loved him because he was not only captured their story, but he was funny about it. And he didn't take himself too seriously. Everybody loved him. So it's really like the principles of storytelling across the board. I was telling my friend Satyanshu Singh, who's a cinema screenwriting professor, who often used to say, in the first 25 minutes, you want the protagonist to be incredibly liked and you want people to root for them. So I've been journaling recently to find what is my story such that when I'm doing my hour, people can root for me in the very first 20 minutes, right? For which I need to go to my childhood and see what are some of the incidents that defined me, that explains even my flaws today, such that you become more likable on stage. That's one. The second part of the question was the creative process during the early writing days. Twitter had a very big role because it gave you these guardrails to be interesting in 140 characters. So joke writing skill became very good because I've written just a countless number of jokes by now. And I had some of the most talented writers working with me. So brevity was important, knowing that there's only 4 minutes is all we had. If Ranbir and Imran Khan are opening the Filmfare Awards, we really just have the first 4 minutes to play with. Can we fit in as many jokes as possible? Interestingness is a byproduct of density of dopamine, right? This is like short video phenomenon is not surprising. Attention spans are going low. So the more you can hit the brain consistently, the better it is. Which is why when people jab koi picture dikhta hai, right? If a new idea is not constantly introduced, ऐसा लगता है थोड़ा stretch हो गया, yeah? You're looking for the next thing immediately. So you can't really spend time. So because we used to be on Twitter, the joke writing skill became really strong. That really helped the paid gigs that we would have. Because नींद में भी लिख सकते हैं हम लोग jokes. किसके बारे में लिखना है? अच्छा ये introduction, show का introduction है, okay. Show के introduction rules क्या होते हैं? Just address the room. We got to address that we're at Filmfare Awards. We got to address the room. We got to address the people who are here. These sort of tricks that you learned from a little bit from stand-up, a little bit from writing books, it all kind of culminated into that.
No, that's very helpful. Let's switch gears and talk about the media or the medium, right? I mean, like we've talked about, and you mentioned also a couple of times today that everything's gotten democratized. So talk about not just the content and the creative expression, but the medium for delivery. You mentioned Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, whatever. So what are the various things that are happening today? And for somebody who's starting where Tanmay was, 15 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever, right? Like, and for them to break out, could the medium end up defining them, or no, it's just going to be the content and the medium, it's whatever is the medium of the day.
So it's super interesting question, right? Because I think every media, every platform, first of all the platforms are meant, they're a playground. Okay. And I think everybody who is in marketing or some sort of creation needs to treat each platform as a playground. One is a cricketing playground, one is a football, one is a gym, for example. Playing in these playgrounds trains different parts of your mental strength. For example, Twitter is a phenomenal playground if you just want to learn how to write, if you just want to be interesting through words, right? Instagram is a phenomenal playground if you just want to get great at editing, right? The best creators are so good, they edit on the fly, they're able to take every trend, make it interesting, put their own spin on it. Similarly, like I don't even know what playground Facebook is anymore. YouTube is also, YouTube is interesting for a slightly YouTube is Instagram but slightly longer. If you're able to crush it on YouTube, I think it's your storytelling skills become super tight if you're able to be interesting for 10 minutes. Each of these is meant, if you're a creator, each of these is an opportunity to have a short feedback loop. And a lot of people underestimate the importance of having a short feedback loop in your life. Short feedback loops help you refine your judgment. They help you understand what consumers like, what they will enjoy. Each of these platforms provides that opportunity. A lot of creative people embark on a longer journey or a bigger project without having the refined judgment. So my personal belief is that the best creators are constantly creating. It's like working out, right? And on the side they have a long project, right? This is my big magnum opus that I'm trying to put out in the world. But in order for that to land, because there's so much at stake, there's time, there's effort, you need this other cycle to know if this will land or no. Without one, the other will fail. It's important for both to exist. And a lot of creators, if you're outputting once a week and then only you want to output something that's going to take 6 months of your life, you need the both to coexist at the same time. Otherwise, they'll suffer. So each platform trains you for a different thing. And I would very much like creators, Instagram creators ask me all the time saying, how do I port to YouTube? I said, it's a slightly different game, but if you're able to crush it on Instagram, you have the skills to be able to do it on YouTube because you have the shorter feedback loop going. This one is a slightly longer feedback loop. If you can be interesting for 30 seconds, you just need to be interesting for 5 minutes. You need to do this 10 times over. It's possible. So yeah, this is what I think about each platform. Well, I've never actually sat and articulated that, but yeah, this was interesting.
I'm smiling year to year because this is the journey of a startup founder, right? So we, are in the business of working with startups and investing in startups, and everyone has a magnum opus that they want to deliver, and it'll take a decade, right? If you're lucky, maybe longer. If you're more lucky, or luckier. But you've got to keep trying and iterating your way through, whether you call it a sprint or you call it customer feedback loop or going out in the field and not in the office or whatever. Correct. Because if you were just saying, nahi, दुनिया में आग लगा देंगे, but there is no feedback loop that you're building Correct.
with. आग लगेगा ही नहीं. आपको आग लगाना है, आपको जानना होता है डिटेल में कि कहाँ केरोसिन गिरानी होती है, ठीक है, दिन के किस वक्त पे आग लगाना होता है, कि कहां से आग शुरू करनी होती है. और आग अक्सर मतलब एक जगह शुरू होता है, पूरा ही थोड़ी लगेगा, थोड़ा 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 करके होता है. So it's the fastidiousness that really takes time for that to happen, and it takes a lot of constant iteration is a good word.
Absolutely. No, and startups are all about that, right? So you iterate to your product market fit or scale or eventual sort of large kind of thing. Yeah, I also saw this interesting quote that Shikhar found for me, which was find yourself an enjoyable feedback loop that you would do for no money.
Yeah.
Maybe you can double click on that a little bit. A bit of a tangent, but still relevant in this feedback context.
Find yourself a feedback loop that you do for no money. Yeah. It actually ties in with what I just said, right? I actually had a thought. I'm like, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? What would you do? And a lot of people have some sort of creative expression endeavor at the end of it, right? That's why you see, folks who have sold their startup for millions of dollars are on Twitter expressing themselves, or they have a YouTube channel now. No, but I thought the end game was wealth. You know, you're there. Now what are you doing? Right. So I think a creative endeavor is at the end of a lot of people's journeys. It's important because creation is everything. And once you want to try different you want to try different playgrounds. But why to wait? Why to wait for the end in order to figure that out? If you can have that from day one, nothing like it. What would you do? I said, I don't think I'm ever going to stop making videos. It could not be the same thing that I'm doing today, but maybe my end state is just podcasting. Maybe that's what fascinates me by the end of it. Or maybe my end state is reels. I don't know, but I know that I'm never going to stop making content because it's the most fun. It's the least boring activity that you can do. Yeah, that's what I meant to ask. That's what I meant to say. I think find a feedback loop that gives you joy. It could be even as small as just learning how to play an instrument, right? That it is a very gratifying feedback loop, especially if you do it in a group where there's people constantly telling you, hey, this is what you can do. You can do it better. That's incredibly fun.
Great. So let me put a little twister here. Imagine I put you online, right? And we'll come to the DAO part of, I mean, your sort of foray into that super team. But before that, I give you access to like 1 million creators, right? But you can't meet them, maybe you can't talk to them, but you can see their product and their creations across platforms. Like, how do you figure out like the next 100 or 1,000 or whatever people that have the potential to be a Tanmay Bhat, right? Like when you're looking at so many different things. So if you are a platform trying to enable these people, one is you can just say, hey, look, survival of the fittest, right? Whoever is getting the most likes, shares, laughs, the other is to say, no, I'm going to figure out how to do this in a little bit more part art, part science manner. So I'd love to know, since you're a super creator yourself, how do you identify these guys or gals?
Oh, it's an interesting question. My very dear friend Trupti keeps telling me, saying, you should end up scouting. He's like, give up your life as a creator. You're getting old. You should sit and scout because there's some leverage there. So how I identify is, look, getting distribution today is not as hard as it's hard, but I think it can be. You can have a variety of skills in order to get that. But at the same time, because so many people are able to build distribution, many of them could be one-trick ponies, right? Because the methods to get distribution are many, right? Can be a one-trick pony. I think the thing that I'm looking for is evidence to the contrary of that, which is, do you understand the first principles of what makes this content work? So anybody who can manage to continue finding a newer audience for an extended period of time, of course, these people have figured it out. Anybody who manages to do it across platforms, that shows range, that shows that their first principle understanding of content is solid. Anybody who's able to articulate well why they do what they do, that's another signal of, okay, there is a deeper understanding of what makes this tick. So these are some of the things that I find. For example, I have my dear friend Ritviz, right? Like he is okay. I'm trying to boil it down to one simple word. I think you need to show range in some aspect, any aspect. It could be range of platform. It could be range of form factor. It could be range of expression in different format. It could be anything. Ritviz is a great example. Um, Ritviz's sound, when I heard it for the first time, it was dance music, but it was also Hindustani classical. Right now, that's a superpower. If you're able to do a fresh combination, right? He showed range and skill in two areas. It just suddenly felt so fresh, because if content is the ability to be interesting for a period of time, now you have two variables to mix and match to be interesting. That's strong, right? If like I was telling someone the other day, saying, okay, I'm a comedian, but I'm also interested in founders, their journey, their story, startups, the VC world. And if I can marry these two, it's suddenly a new form of interesting, right? The other day I got up on stage and I'm making jokes about, the VC world, I'm so jealous of, I was like, this can only happen in Bangalore. I'm on stage and someone who works at Zerodha was in the audience. And I started riffing. I'm like, I'm just so jealous of Nikhil Kamath. How can this man be so incredibly successful without ever raising VC money, be bulky, and he plays the guitar? What the fuck is this? This is too many things to be perfect in one human being. This is unfair, right? So in that moment, I was like, okay, this is interesting that this combination is new because there's multiple variables. So I think range is a nice way of defining if there's potential for longevity.
Great. And that brings the other interesting topic, which is that of longevity, right? And again, I'll draw an analogy to the software world, not necessarily startups, where, when I graduated, there was a C programming language, not even C++, right? And then there was Java. And then, so you have to have range, right? You have to be able to use different mediums, different tools to adapt your art and your skill.
Yeah, range is, yeah.
Yeah, range. And so how do you leverage not just range? What are other things that go into longevity? Not just variety and breaking out, but just sustaining that over a decade or more, actually.
The Naval tweet comes to mind, which is work like a lion. That's something interesting. You want to have a marathon of sprints and not just a marathon. You want to run, relax, eat, rejuvenate, reinvent, get back. Someone has been so good. I think Karan Johar is a phenomenal example. I once was lucky to share a flight with him, where he gifted me his book, and I was talking to him about just his career, and I realized that holy shit, this dude's been so incredibly relevant since 98, 1997, 1998.
Yeah.
But now in 2022, it's 25 years is a very long time to be at the top of one's game. Very few people from 1998 are still the name in the industry. There's something to be learned there. Be it, in 2014 when he was part of the roast, right? Like there's range there as well, right? Like Karan is able to be the host of Coffee with Karan while also producing films, while also being able to direct, while also being able to recognize talent and being able to do all of that. And at the same time, having founder mentality and creating an enterprise that can work around him. That's incredible. I think this is a problem that a lot of creators are going to face, which is you will find initial traction, but having a decade-long career is important. Sometimes creators often feel, because creators are very status-driven, they're not able to see this coming. Creators have something that most people would die for, the ability to create distribution. It requires a certain skill that can be expressed in many different ways. If you're able to create distribution, you have something, boss. You can, tumko kuch to chamakta hai. It's not the only way to leverage that isn't just to keep maximizing follower count. Maybe it is to maximum follower counts on multiple platforms. Maybe it is to take it offline and see how you can maybe teach. Maybe it is to see how you can start a B2B business as a creator. Maybe consulting is something for which a lot of creators have to get out of the status mindset, because a lot of creators are still so focused on maximizing eyeballs on the next thing that they forget to build the next bridge that can lead them to whatever else that they're doing. Some of them are really smart and they start asking the right questions early on. But I think as every couple of years pass by and people see in front of their own eyes, folks who were crushing it 2 years ago are no longer supported by the algorithm. It starts becoming obvious. It's, the folks who do end up continuing to be relevant for a while, they start standing out a lot more. If you're able to, so the first principle is storytelling. It just needs to be ported over and over to multiple other things. What can someone who makes Instagram reels today, what can they do? They can 100% attempt YouTube, because unlike the Instagram algorithm, the YouTube algorithm is a little more loyal to you, which is if you're able to get 100,000 subs as a creator, it feels like it's easier for me to reach those 100,000 than on Instagram. Because on Instagram, if you have 100,000 people, one reel could be 40K, another could be 6 million, right? That's rarer on YouTube, by the way.
Let's as we come towards the end of the podcast, let me flip it around and say, if you're a platform that was building for creators, and there are many now, and I don't mean the big guys, right? I mean, like, everybody is trying to enable creators, tools for creators, for getting them distribution, monetization, reach, brand, whatever. How should you work with creators, right? When you're like one of the platform builders, for lack of a better word.
I think when it comes to creator economy startups, right? I've spoken to many of them. Again, it's not something new that I'm saying. I think a lot of times the problem to be addressed should be the longest time spent. Is this a real problem? Second, there are multiple layers of creators. Every few 100,000 followers that they gain, there's a different need and a requirement. Every platform has a different requirement. So I think the core problem is where a lot of folks need to spend the most amount of time. So obsessively speaking to your customers, that is mega important. How else would you engage with creators? Can you be a little more specific on that question? Is there any example that you can give?
Yeah, no. So imagine your share chat or a meme platform, or I wanted to talk about Super Team Tower. We probably won't get to it, right? But you're building a platform to enable creators to do their thing, right? Like I said, it could be anything. Could be just to create, right? Could be to distribute. Could be to monetize. Could be to manage, silly, boring, mundane things like your accounting and payroll and collections of whatever, or to manage your attributions or whatever, right? Like there's a whole set of people building picks and shovels and things in every which way to say, hey, what does the creator need? Let me go help, right? Them do that. But the question is, most of them, at least on the startup side, we see they don't have the empathy for the creator. They're just going and saying, "Yeah, theek hai, matlab banate hain," right? Like this is of course
buzzword,
but this
I'm
going to build this, right? Like let me do that.
So there's different types of platforms, right? Let's look at the successful ones in them. There's one which is like content platforms, like TikTok. Okay, let's look at TikTok as a phenomenal example. What are some characteristics of TikTok that when they started, what are some things that they that they did. I remember when TikTok happened, I was sitting and waiting. I was telling my management saying, I'm sure at some point TikTok will want to pay to get creators from other platforms to get on. Because my managers were like, why aren't you on TikTok? You should get on TikTok. I'm like, nahi, paisa aayega, rukte na. Someone will offer money. It didn't come for a very, very long time. It just never happened. So one of the lessons there is your platform will have its own rock stars, right? You want to empower them. YouTube did this phenomenally well in the early days. I'm talking 2012, 13, 14. If you were creating on YouTube did everything they could to enable distribution for you. Today's YouTube interface, if you look at it, right, it's very different from 7 years ago. उस टाइम पे recommended channels होते थे. अब तो सिर्फ recommended videos होते हैं. Recommended channels होते थे. तुम कुछ देख रहे हो, बाजू में 4 और चैनल recommended, तुम instantly subscribe कर सकते थे. तो सब ऐसे फटे हैं ना जो regular consistently बने early. YouTube rewarded them. They found their own power users before, instead of trying to poach others. And the same goes for Instagram as well. Instagram is incredibly loyal to the folks who create on Instagram. जब Instagram पार्टी रखता है, बहुत कम यूट्यूबर दिखेंगे आपको वहां पे. कोई दिखता नहीं है, सिर्फ Instagram वाले ही दिखते हैं वहां पे. Yeah, so I think that is super important. Then on the the more like the B2B, where the creator it's a creator tool. I'm trying to think of what are some of the most phenomenal tools, right? Have a very okay. So for example, one of my favorite tools is InShots. Okay, what a phenomenal tool they made. It's almost like they made it. It's almost like they made it for people who make reels. Right? I can't imagine, like I have some friends who make reels for a living, and it's like they are InShot editors. Like there's a particular way that they use InShots, and they cannot live without it. It's almost like InShots was made for one use case. That's it, and it's so perfect for it that they just cannot think of. They just will never port. They won't do anything else. And the delta was so high on it. Earlier, to edit like that, you needed a laptop or a PC to do it, and it was so, for one specific use case, it was the best solution. That I think I speak to some startups who, I mean, none of this is new, I mean, this feels very basic, right? Like I'm not saying anything new, but some of these cliches are true. You want to be something for someone. Kya hai wo quote? You want to be something for someone, then everything for everyone. Whatever version of that I'm trying to talk.
Yeah, no, there's this other thing called Lindy effect, right? Which basically says, the longer a truth lasts, the longer it will last further, right? So the shelf life keeps going exponentially.
Correct.
So
this is one of those Lindy advice.
Yeah. You know what? I forget the name of your teacher, right? Who said, "Arey, Tanmay, tum original likhte ho, uske I give you 9 out of 10." Originality will still be true after 20 years, 15 years, no matter what form, creator, economy, Web3, whatever.
Yeah.
So
originality is nothing but just standing out from the crowd, right? Standing out from what's the norm. As the norm changes, the definition of originality keeps changing. Yeah.
Wonderful. Hey, we can't end without some joke, some wisecrack on VC startup ecosystem. Kuch to bolna padega, right? I mean, there are so many other things I wanted to talk about, but we're sort of a bit out of time. So love to hear some, interesting new joke, meme, whatever.
Nothing. I've moved to Bangalore recently, which has been very interesting. And I realized that this is a setup that I have. Okay, I don't have any jokes here, but I'd like to riff with you. Right, I'd like to riff with you. So
let's do it.
Yeah. So the setup that I had was that I moved here, and I was talking to someone saying कि यार जिस तरीके से लोग बॉम्बे आते स्ट्रगल करने, लोग अभी फाउंडर बैंगलोर आ रहे स्ट्रगल करने, राइट? तो फाउंडर इज द न्यू हीरो, राइट? बैंगलोर इज द न्यू बॉलीवुड, राइट? Which would make Sequoia Yashraj films. So there's like, if anyone's listening, I'd love for you guys to draw parallels. I have a bunch that that I had written down. Hang on. I had a bunch that I had written down. Which would make Sequoia Yashraj film, which means Shailendra Singh is Yash Chopra. There's some commonalities between the two, right? Bombay mein, if you're news on Instagram, it's bad news. Bangalore mein, if you're news on Twitter, it's bad news. Right? Like, sorry, it's reverse. Bangalore mein, if you're news on Instagram, you're bad news. Because normal जनता तक bleed हो चुका है ये.
Yes.
Right? Bollywood में Twitter से फटती है क्योंकि Twitter पे trend नहीं होना है भाई देखो.
Correct.
Right? Kunal is Amir thinking hero, right? So yeah, there was the Bansals or the Khans or the Kapoors of Bangalore. We have NSD, you have IIT. So yeah, there's just a bunch of these parallels that I was
amazing.
I was trying to put this thing. And there was a bunch of random observations. People saying they're building in stealth is a way of just teasing. किसी ने पूछा नहीं, but तुमको बोलना है कि तुम्हारा कुछ चल रहा है. One of the trends that I absolutely hate this about Bangalore is this the scan the menu thing at every restaurant.
Yes.
So the other day I was at a restaurant and I scanned the menu. It took me to a website that I'm trying to eat salmon. So I searched for fish. और उधर Kingfisher दिख रहा है पूरे menu. Kingfisher. तो मैं देख रहा हूँ and I was like, this thing began as a contactless thing, right? COVID के time पे you don't want contact. तो मैं देख रहा हूँ, मैंने पे fish Kingfisher दिखाई है, तो मैं मैनेजर को बुलाया कि यार मेरे को सैल्मन खाना है. So like होगा ना सैल्मन, होगा ना सर. Now he's taken my phone and he's typing something in. फिर उसको मिल नहीं रहा है सैल्मन. तो एक और वेटर को बुलाया. Now there's 3 people all huddled next to each other trying to find salmon on the menu. And in this process, maximum contact has been achieved.
You never let anyone touch your phone ever.
And now everyone and their father-in-law is touching my phone, and we're all on top of each other. I said, "कहाँ यार कोविड से कहाँ बच रहे हो तुम? इससे तो मेन्यू था. मेन्यू को तुम मत टच करो ना, हमको टच करने दो. It's that much easier." So sometimes there's too much technology, and I think this scanning menu thing is too much technology because earlier menus were just easier, right? Okay, mains, starters, mains, appetizers, drinks, simple. अभी क्योंकि तुम कुछ भी कर सकते हो और कॉस्ट नहीं है प्रिंट करने का नया मेन्यू, तो सारा मेन्यू खोलेगा तो न्यू डिलाइट. अब मुझे न्यू ओल्ड डिलाइट, मुझे क्या पता ओल्ड डिलाइट क्या था. Why are you doing this to me? Just keep it simple. So that guardrail that you would need to think twice before you reprint the menu was really good. Now it's just creativity for creativity's sake. It needs to stop. Anyway, so there's some
awesome. In fact, I was going to recommend that you do a parallel, or we can do a parallel between startups and creators or comedians, because I saw that thread run through the whole chat that I had with you today. But I think Bollywood heroes and startups
is funnier.
That is funnier and more interesting. So
yeah.
So thank you so much, Tanmay, for being on the podcast. This is definitely one of the more funnier and thoughtful and more creative ones, shall we say? So thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Amit, for having me.
Yeah.
Chat soon.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.